Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's live discussion on Loki season 2. I'm actually on my channel instead of Darren's. Feels weird talking about a Marvel project, but here we are talking about Loki season 2 because I love this show so much. I could not skip this for a live stream. Had to do one, and I'm so glad to be joined by my usual friends who I would travel in time to save. First is, of course, my sister Alyssa. Alyssa, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It is weird that it's not Darren's channel. I do. But also, I want to congratulate Darrin for this first live stream I've done with him for a while, where he hasn't had to have the hashtag for SAG-AFTRA and
Yes,
for the writers' strike and the actors union. So, really happy about that. But anyway, yeah, good to be here.
and of course, Darrin. Darrin, thanks so much for joining.
Oh, excited to be here. Really excited to talk about this. And yeah, definitely excited that the strikes are over. People can be getting back to work. I mean, there's still votes and things that need to happen, but I think for the most part, production can resume and we can get back to making some cool stuff. Like Loki, though maybe not a season 3 yet. Don't know yet. Seems to be up in the air.
Maybe that's a topic we can have because I think I kind of agree with you, Mark, that I don't think there should be a season 3, but maybe we can talk about that at the end.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I've heard that definitely there wouldn't be, but
There wouldn't be. Okay.
we'll see.
Yeah, but I forget about shows, and then they do have another season, so you never know. But
yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
Very true. All right, so yeah, let's go ahead and get started. We'll start with our overall thoughts on Loki season 2. I recently released my full-length review a couple days ago for this, so if you saw that, you know my thoughts. I loved it. I thought it was one of the best properties one of the best projects that Marvel MCU has done. It would probably be my top 3. I thought season 2 was way better than season 1. Well, not way better because I like season 1 too, but I think this even exceeded that, which is, I'm surprised to watch so many reviews of people saying they like season 1 better than season 2. I'm like, really? Like, I thought, I like season 1, don't get me wrong, but I thought it had more filler with them hanging out in the apocalypse or like hanging out in that weird place, with all the crocodile Loki and all that. I didn't really like that episode. And then the finale was mostly an exposition dump. And I thought this was every single episode was pushing the story forward. And I heard one reviewer say, oh, they thought that the character stories were lost in season 2. I'm like, again, what are you talking about? The character stories were even stronger in season 2 than they were in season 1. So yeah, I absolutely love this from a timey-wimey perspective because I love weird abstract time travel stuff, which is exactly what we got. And of course they threw in great character stories. And I gotta say, way back when they first announced the Loki show on Disney Plus, I had no idea it was going to be about time travel or TVA. All I knew was Loki. And I'm like, I don't want to watch that. That's dumb. Why do I want to watch Loki for? I'm sick of Loki. They've done this character to death. And the fact that they actually made it this fascinating, and not just the time travel concept, but the character of Loki. They really excelled and really pushed his character in a direction I had no idea that they would. And I just thought there were a lot of specific moments, which we could get into later, that just really I just touched me, that I thought was really awesome. So yeah, this is one of the favorite things I've seen in a while. Darrin, we'll go to you next. What did you think of Loki season 2?
Well, as usual, I'm here to refute you on every point you make in these reviews. No, I'm kidding. We're actually not too far, I think, out of step from one another because, yeah, I love this. Loki season 1 is one of my top things from Phase 4 entirely. And this is definitely the best Disney Plus property of Phase 5, we could just say. Or even Marvel, Guardians being a great show, a great movie, but this was, I really have 2 minds of this, possibly even 3. One of which is I loved it. It was awesome. The character stuff was great. The interaction was wonderful. Adding Ke Kwan, of course, is always a wonderful addition. Um, I love the chemistry the cast has when they're together, when they're doing things. Even honestly, the little moment where you've got Mobius and Loki having pie just sitting in the cafeteria is very delicious. And unlike a lot of the other Disney Plus properties, there is a consistency in feel, in mood, in character. Everything feels right and together. The addition of Victor Timely into this was amazing, and Jonathan Majors still showing how great he is and how many different variations he can bring to his characters is just astounding. And the fact that they did kind of definitively end it makes sense for the story that they were playing. I think they brought up a nice arc, and yeah, to me there would be no need for a season 3. He's already OP before even the final episode. I don't see how he could interact really with any other character outside of like some advisory capacity, like beaming down from on high. So within all of that, I think that it really does its job well, and I think probably amongst the best of any of the Disney Plus shows, and really kind of telling a complete story. What pulls me back from the ultimate joy that I have for what they were able to pull up on screen is, I guess we might say, your inconsistencies with season 1, where I think that there is some storytelling choices that change. The Loom feels very made up and unnecessary for drama's sake. If you look past even some of its ideas, even a little bit deeply, we can touch on that later on if we need to, but things like that, some of the powers that Loki and He Who Remains are exhibiting, or He Who Remains exhibits, would totally upend season 1 if you played it back that way. There are just a lot of small things that, and the first couple of episodes felt very, to me, like almost like MacGuffin hunts. First episode, we got to get Loki back and do the thing and get the stuff and place the button, and then we get back Loki. Okay, and now we're ready to go. And it's like, no, we got to get Sylvie. Okay, so we've got an episode. We go back and we do interviews. We get back, we have to convince, and things go wrong, and we get back together, and finally we're back all together, and it's time for the adventure to begin. Okay, now we got to introduce the antagonist. Okay, so now we start to go back in time. We introduce Smiley, and we show what Renslayer's doing, and we show his whole background. We get this, and now they're all together, and we're about the adventure to begin. It's episode 3 now. 4, they all die. It felt very kind of stuttered starting in its storytelling, which, while lovely, kind of gave me a very odd feel as the season went. So, like I said, I loved everything that it brought, and it did it amazingly well. The only things that keep me from really totally falling in love with it is just this and a few other, which we can touch on later, of just, to me, storytelling limitations, choices, things that just feel made up so drama can happen, so the story can happen, but doesn't really feel actually connected to the rest of the world.
All right, Alyssa, your thoughts.
Okay, the one of you that I agree with more is Mark. I am absolutely on the same page with Mark. I did not have any of the issues that Darrin mentioned, although I'm sure we'll talk about. Yeah, this to me was not only, I would also say top 3 Marvel, and easily the best season of television in Disney Plus history. I'm counting Star Wars in that. I mean, I haven't watched anything else besides Star Wars and MCU, but I've seen some trailers for some things. They're not as good as Loki season 2. So I think it's safe to say it's the best thing. That Disney Plus has not been the greatest, let's be honest. So this is absolutely my favorite thing on that. Yeah, I'm kind of mostly repeating what Mark would say, because I had three major reasons. One is the timey-wimey stuff. mind-blowing stuff. I love time travel stuff. Anyone who knows me or knows my channel knows that I love really cerebral time travel stuff that makes your brain hurt. That's why I like Dark from Netflix is like my favorite show of all time, because it makes your brain hurt, but it works. And that's what I love. I hate these like just cheesy ass Hollywood movies that like do time travel poorly. Like what was the one with Ryan Reynolds in it last year that came on Netflix? Like just all that crap and garbage. Like I want like that has time travel logic that makes no sense. Even some that are really popular, like Looper, garbage. That time travel logic is garbage. So I love time travel when it's done this well, and especially in the context of the MCU. This is an extremely cerebral show. We have now 2 seasons in a row that do not feel the need to end with a sky beam or a big CGI battle or a character fighting another character with the same powers. None of that. Both seasons ended that way. And we don't want to get into season 1, but I will agree to disagree. The end of season 1 was an exposition dump. I thought it was actually a really great cerebral ending to that season, but whole other story. To be like in the head, be cerebral, that is so unique for Marvel, and that in and of itself makes it one of the best Marvel projects. But also I love the way that it subverted expectations, and not everything that subverts expectations necessarily pulls it off. I can think of a couple of examples off the top of my head, but in this case, it really did. You're watching episode 4 because you're expecting your heroes to succeed. And at the end of episode 4, Victor Timely turns into spaghetti and it makes this like creepy noise, like, woo! I'm like, what the fuck? And then there's 2 episodes left. And I remember watching a video of a YouTuber who was lucky enough to get the first 4, or unlucky enough actually, to get the first 4 episodes in advance. And he had watched the first 4 episodes before any of us saw the first episode, and he was talking about it in a spoiler-free way. And he was like, well, I'll just say, I cannot wait to see what happens after episode 4. He was playing it very cool. I would have been like, what? I have to wait 5 weeks to see what happens? What? Like, I would not have wanted to get the first 4 episodes all in a row and then have to wait a long time to see what happens next. So, I mean, it was mind-blowing. It was excellent at subverting expectations. And then the finale, also not how anyone expected it to go, but it was brilliant. Also, yeah, Mark alluded to before, the character stuff. I have also heard people say that the character stuff isn't as strong, and I don't know what show they're watching. I totally disagree with that. But to each their own. I will point to one specific moment, and that is in episode 5 when Sylvie pushes Loki. They're at the bar, and she pushes him to admit what he's really doing. He's not doing it to save the galaxy, to save the universe, multiverse, whatever. He's doing it for his friends, and him coming to that realization, that was that hit me. That was such a good moment, because he's admitting that he's doing it for selfish reasons, but also those selfish reasons are because he has friends that he cares about. And this is the Loki who is not that far removed from the Avengers film. Remember that this Loki at the beginning of season 1 is just coming out of the Avengers movie, and yet we buy it. Like, they develop it well. It works really well. Like, I believe this character development, and for him to make basically a sacrifice, because he's got to, I guess, just sit there for eternity holding up a big tree of the multiverse. Like, that doesn't seem like boring to me. Like, it doesn't seem like a lot of fun. But he did it for his friends, and the way that the show portrayed that, and the way that they sold it, and the way that Tom Hiddleston portrays it, is all of it is just so good. So yeah, kind of on board with you, Mark. Definitely one of the best shows I've seen in a while, or at least within the MCU.
Well, yeah, it's funny because he actually does go from the beginning of season 1, almost taking over, just post Avengers. And in this one, he's actually sitting with Mobius like, remember that time I was so mad at my brother and my dad. I took over New York and held it hostage there. It was just wasn't thinking right. Which, yeah, is just some of the best work in this.
All right, just wanted to say hi to Bob and Rob in the chat. Bob noticing that I shaved. Yes, I did do that. And then Rob saying, I kept getting Doctor Who kind of vibes as the season went on. Loki is the new three-eyed raven. Oh, I didn't think of it in that terms, but don't remind me of Game of Thrones. Anyway, but yeah, I'd never watched Doctor Who, so I wouldn't know.
So wait, he's going to become the king of Westeros?
Yeah, because he tells good stories. Who has better stories?
Yeah. Oh,
he's Loki the brand.
All right. So let's go ahead and jump into it. The first thing I wanted to open with is, I guess, something I already know Darrin would kind of agree with me on, but I wanted to get your opinion on this if I was the only one that kind of noticed this, because when I first saw the episode 1 and the opening of it, I kind of got vibes that the show changed directions in between seasons. And I could be totally wrong. And I said this in my review. Maybe I'm just misinterpreting it incorrectly. Maybe it was a purpose, like fake out. But from my impression I got from the end of season 1 is when Loki comes back and sees his giant statue of He Who Remains, or Kang, you could even call it. I kind of got the vibe that because Sylvie killed He Who Remains, that now there's Kangs everywhere controlling it, and now Kang, the timeline has changed, and now Kang's controlling the TVA, and his variants are everywhere. And season 2 will be about them trying to fight off all these variants that are controlling everything. And then, but it's not about that. It's actually him traveling back in time to a time when Kang, or He Who Remains, controlled the TVA, and apparently erased everyone's memory and put up statues of the timekeepers instead, so they wouldn't know who he was. And the one piece of evidence I have that makes me think that they changed direction was when I rewatched this scene at the end of season 1. They show. What was her name? B-15? That's her name, like 100 B. Yeah, they showed her and Mobius looking at all the timelines going crazy. And like, oh my God, it's splintering everywhere. And then they show Loki going back to the TVA, and then Mobius and Hunter B-15 are still looking at their TemPads, acting like everything's going to shit and everything's going crazy. And then Loki appears. So that makes me think that was meant to be in the present. But in season 2, they changed their mind and made it just changed direction entirely and made it in the past. Not saying that I mind, especially considering how great season 2 was, but I don't know. I was just wondering if anyone agrees with me on this. Alyssa, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I actually couldn't tell whether it was a change of direction and they retconned it, or if it was a misdirect, until you pointed out in your video that scene that you just mentioned between Mobius and Hunter B-15. I keep wanting to color Hunter B-52, sorry. But that scene, yeah, that kind of does definitively show that they did change direction and they decided to retcon it. Maybe they couldn't come up with a plan for that, and like, actually, let's not do that. Let's do something different. And to that, I say, I don't care. Like, I mean, what they did was excellent, and I think other than that one scene, it fits pretty seamlessly. It's just that you just kind of have to ignore that one scene that you mentioned at the end of season 1. But I really do not give a shit. I'll be perfectly honest with you. It does not bother me at all. It's like, whatever. Things retcon things sometimes. And because the story ends up working so well and the direction that they went in worked so well for me, I'm not going to fuss over a little retcon there. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I will say I was disappointed at first because I wanted to see this King multiverse battle, but then what they, again, like what you just said, what they did with the season was so amazing. I wanted to be like, yeah, they wanted to go in that direction. That direction really worked for them. So, anyway, Darrin, your thoughts?
Was this what they would have originally intended for season 2? No. I will completely agree with you in that, because that felt more like Loki had gotten past when he went back. He is now in an alternate universe's TVA than his original one, where the same things are happening or similar things, but nobody knows who he is. That's the sort of feel that I got off of when we left season 1. When season 2 started, it was, no, he's now further back in time to when Kang was still the head of the TVA before he wiped everyone's memory again and turned into the timekeepers to do it. So some far, far, far flung past time, and then, coming back forward. So, I mean, again, they told an amazing story, and I think it basically came down to is, okay, who's got a pitch for the next one? And this was the pitch they threw out. Maybe not originally having a plan. We've definitely changed some people. The head directors we got in, Benson and Moorhead, who did The Endless, which we talked about in our time travel episode ages ago.
Oh, wait, so the guys who did The Endless, like, were the showrunners for season 2?
Were the big, directors here. They did, they jumped in on Moon Knight. They were involved in part of Moon Knight, and then they came over and did this as well. So they've got strong visions. I think that they just saw potentials, and they were like, hey, let's take this character and this place into a whole thing, not tell the multiverse war story, but tell this how Loki really can become like, this next god story. And I think that was basically the pitch and how they twisted, which is why I think a lot of things that I may bring up through this don't make a lot of sense in connection to the story told in season 1. It's like, again, we're in a parallel universe where this became the season 2 as opposed to the original one. It's very close, and it branches at about the same point, but it's going to be different.
So you think there are more inconsistencies in the season from?
Oh, I mean, to be honest, I'll throw them out here real quick. To me, the Loom doesn't make a whole lot of sense of how that it all works and how it's twisting where the timelines, because it's supposed to take like raw time and then turn it into weave time, but the branches are coming from the raw time. But when they fall apart, it's like they're being de-threaded, that whole spaghettification. There's a weird logic to it that doesn't totally make sense how all of that works. Also, what is it for? We do find out later on that it's a failsafe, and that does sort of make sense. But the original multiversal war existed long beforehand. Okay. As we see the end in the timelines all branch off, it looks like the main timeline that's around. So where this raw time to this threaded time fits into the story they told of the timeline in season 1, to me, just doesn't jive.
Okay.
It's like, where does that fit within all of this?
I can already tell talking about this show is going to make my head hurt getting into the time.
Well, I won't go ahead and say that. I'm just saying that's one of the things that come on. And then later on, when He Who Remains is trying to get Loki to stop killing him, or trying to get Loki to stop Sylvie from killing him, he's exhibiting powers that he didn't have in season 1, because if he wanted Sylvie to stop, he could have froze both of them, killed them, got rid of them, and it would have been a problem.
But he didn't want her to stop. He says that, do you really think I would let her just kill me without a plan? Right. He wanted her to kill him, or he wanted her to kill him. So that's why he never used those powers.
But then why have the failsafe Loom if this is doing what he wants it to do? And if it blows up and kills everything.
I just read it as this whole thing, like he just plays 10-dimensional chess. So the whole thing was his plan. He anticipated everything with Loki, all of this. So
I think the Loom was a part of his plan too.
Yeah, that's how I read it. Yeah.
That's what's stopping Loki from getting what he wants.
Yeah.
But the other inconsistency I did notice was in that final scene because in season 1 there was a point where He Who Remains like put a timer and is like, oh, I have no idea what's going to happen now, and
Right.
that's why he was vulnerable, and they kind of ignored that part of it, and he now knew everything was going on. Plus the way he said see you soon, I heard someone say from watching the finale that, oh, he's saying that to Loki because Loki's going back in time over and over again. But Loki wasn't even there the first time he said, see you soon. He was clearly saying that to Sylvie.
Sure.
Well, I always read that as like he has some plan to come back and he'll be back. And which he does talk about in this episode too.
But to me, that's what doesn't make sense with season 1. At the end of season 1, he's like, look, I'm tired. This is the end of it here. You kill me and you take over, or you don't, and the whole thing goes to place, and then there's going to be giant war. But he was like done. So why he seems to have a plan to like not be killed at the end of this doesn't make sense. That was part, and if sense, why go through all of season 1 if he could have just stopped them at any point and stayed He Who Remains running?
But he did have a plan to come back because he said, see you soon.
Sure,
So
but that's in the whole
always-
reincarnation of the multiverse, which he was then going to unleash.
Well, again, I think it works, but I think it's a clear change in direction.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. It's a great
Yeah.
story, and that's an amazing accomplishment. But to me, I also see those inconsistencies of like, yeah, but this doesn't. Whatever. Again,
No, I
you
mean,
can
I
stick
think
with
I
it or
can
not.
see. I think I can see that. Yeah, sure, they changed their minds of what they originally wanted, but I don't see it as inconsistent. Like it fits, so I don't have a problem with it. It still fits, even if it wasn't originally what they had thought of.
Sure.
So I don't really see the inconsistencies. I mean, I see what you're talking about, but to me, it still works. I can see, oh yeah, this is not what they were originally thinking. But anytime I watch any show where they do a retcon, where it's clearly where they not think what they were originally thinking, I ask myself, does this fit? Does it work, or does it clearly not fit? And for me, it fits. Maybe for you, it doesn't seem to fit as much. So it's just a difference of how we view it. But I didn't. But I had another thing to say about the change and the original inconsistency that we were talking about. That it was supposed to be like an alternate timeline or an alternate universe. I remember asking, how the hell does that work with the TVAs outside of time? How is there an alternate timeline to the TVA? How are they going to explain that? And I think their answer was, we have no explanation for this. Do something different, because it didn't really make sense.
Yeah.
Like the way that they were going to go didn't make any sense. And I was really curious, how were they going to explain that? Because it made no sense to me. And I think they've figured out that it actually doesn't make sense, so we got to do something different. So another reason why I'm not really that bothered by it.
Yeah, I mean that very well it could be it. That's why it is like decided to go in a different direction. When I first saw the season 1 finale, I assumed that they were in a branched timeline. That was like a different version. That would be multiple versions.
But I was always confused by that because the TVA exists outside of all the branches. So how can there be a branched timeline of the TVA? That made no sense to me. And it turns out there wasn't, and that's the answer.
They're warring TVAs. TVAs at war. No.
I thought there would be multiple TVAs, but I guess you're right. That probably wouldn't jive with the TVA being outside of time. But then again, in season 2, they were saying that time slipping shouldn't be possible in TVA because it was outside of time, and yet Loki still does it.
Yeah, because Loki has those powers. He didn't know it yet. Like
there's a TVA outside of time.
But now there was clearly a linear time within the TVA because the Kang whatever erased everyone's memories, and they have no memory of like earlier time. So
it is weird how the time works in TVA but then also like they were each taken out at like Mobius is taken from 2022, Hunter B-15 is taken from 2012, and what's his face Rutherford is taken from the 60s, and they all have been there for seemingly thousands of years and not aging. So it's a weird. I don't quite understand how time works in the TVA, but you're right. There's also like a linear time thing that happens there.
Yes, I wanted to say hello to Alex409 who popped in saying I thought the finale was great. We might have missed the first part of our stream. We all did as well. I loved the finale. All right, so I want to talk about Ouroboros now. God, how do you say the actor's name?
I think it's Ke Huy Quan.
Ke Kwan, yeah, who of course is in I think wasn't it Everything Everywhere All at Once, like his
It was Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah, that was his return. That was his
return
to acting.
But of course, it will always be Short Round /
yeah, he was like a perfect choice. He added so much to it. Although I do think Everything Everywhere All at Once is overrated, but that's another topic for another time.
I agree.
But he was great in the role of Ouroboros. I think maybe calling this character Ouroboros is a bit on the nose because it gets into the whole theme of the season is how everything's like a circular loop and everything's looping around. And he even says later in the season, he's like, it's like a snake eating its own tail, which is what an Ouroboros is. I think this character was just delightful. And I think the fact that he was just hidden in the basement and no one really saw him in like 400 years, like adds to the quirkiness of the TVA, which is really consistent with the feel of season 1 and everything. And I like how, Mobius was pretending. I was like, yeah, I remember. I stayed for her. I was like, no, you left immediately. It's like, yeah. That was a great introduction to the character. And I think he became a main character and he became a really like important part of like the entire lore, being the person who wrote the TVA handbook, and that his work was based off of Victor Timely's work, but then Victor Timely's work was based off of his book. And then he of course was the main one driving, trying to fix the loom and everything like that. So I thought this was an amazing addition to the cast. Really enhanced season 2 a lot. Thoughts? Start with Darrin.
Everything you just said and more. He is just such a delight to see. He is so joyful and so what to be just the energy that comes off of, I think, just the actor himself just invigorates his characters, and especially with OB here. And yeah, the fact that even when Loki was time slipping, he could tell OB back in the past, and then suddenly OB now would remember it, and Mobius recognized it. That's one of the things is like paradoxes I have no problem with in the TVA, because maybe it's not a timeline, but a time loop. The TVA is an Ouroboros itself, and it's just the characters are just moving along the same time loop over and over again. However that works, to me, that's the quirkiness of the TVA, but everything to there makes sense. That you could have a paradox, or you could tell someone in the past and then they didn't know it before, but now they'll suddenly remember it in the future. That totally makes sense for me, to me. So I think that's great. Like you said, I think he brings that extra level of quirkiness and variance in here, where Mobius is kind of like the fatherly investigator type. He is like the child inventor who's just constantly excited about everything that's going on. And I think it gave a perfect alternate feel in with the TVA and really kept its character going. So yeah, brilliant addition to the cast.
Yeah, he fit in so seamlessly that I kept forgetting that he wasn't in season 1, because he just fit in so well. Yeah, and he was a very important part of the season, and I loved that when they that episode 5, when they all went back to their lives, and how easily he believed Loki. He was like, "Oh yeah, sure," and then just started going along with him. And then like 5 minutes later, he's invented his temp pad, or I guess it took him a little while to do that, but he comes in, he has his own temp pad. Yeah, everything he does just adds to the quirkiness and yeah, so just the vibe that was started in season one, he just fits in so well to everything. So absolutely love this character.
Yeah, and I think this is also he's part of the reason why I like season 2 better than season 1, because they add so much to the cast of characters that was something that was missing from season 1.
Yeah. Also, I don't know if we're going to talk about this or not, but they give Casey more to do in this season.
Oh no, I wasn't going to mention that. So yeah,
Yeah,
Casey, yes, Casey.
Yeah. He's not as charming. I mean, he's not as Obi. I'm just going to call him Obi because that's what they call him in the show.
Yeah.
But he actually plays a good role in this season. I like that they kind of give.
Yeah, and like in season 1, he seemed to me to just be like the ordinary office worker who was just like an ordinary guy minding his business and not oblivious to how like magical and mystical the TVA actually was. But here they sort of, season 2, they played him up even more and made him sort of a more important part. And I was like, oh, Rutherford getting more screen time.
Yeah.
Well, and also I think they honored the actor in a kind way as saying that, the person who would play him in the movies would be Clint Eastwood, because he's Frank, the escapee in Escape from Alcatraz, and I think that's the character that Clint Eastwood played in the movie. So I thought that was kind of a fun thing. I'm like, oh, right on. That's a fun little bit.
Yeah. All right. So I wanted to talk about Hunter X5, because I want to talk about him real quick, because when he first popped up in episode 1, and he was kind of like being antagonistic to Mobius and like giving him shit about jet skis or whatever. And when he first popped up, I was like, who's this guy in season 1? Like, who is this guy? But then apparently he wasn't in season 1. I was like, this guy just seemed to appear out of nowhere. And then in episode 2, they had a whole story arc with him like going back to the 70s, being a movie star. And I didn't even recognize him from episode 1. I was like, wait, is that the guy from episode 1 who was being a dick to Mobius? And so I guess the question is, was this character necessary? I mean, I think he pushes the story along in some ways. Like seeing Loki hunt after him in the 70s was cool. That he's able to use his magic to trap him, and then they have to trying to interrogate them was funny scenes, because they were doing a shitty job at interrogating him. And then of course he eventually he did at the end of episode 2, when he gives away where Sylvie is, but then he's freaking out. It's like, okay, can we get this food to go? Let's get out of here. Kind of hinting that he knows what Docs, I think her name was, what her plan was to eliminate all the timelines. So that was kind of crucial as well. And then he ends up switching sides and joins up with Renslayer, but then that's not very long lasting. It didn't last very long. He was pruned pretty shortly after. So I don't know. To answer my own question, I would say yes, but he was necessary, because you are missing out. You do need a character like that, but I think his inclusion seemed kind of rough, like just thrown in there. Alyssa, I'll start with you. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that.
I actually don't think he was necessary. Like, I think you could have made up for anything that he does. I think you could have made up for it elsewhere. Yeah, that probably is one of the few things in the season that I wasn't totally on board with. I wasn't interested in this character. I did not care about him. I did not even recognize in episode 2 that he was the same guy from episode 1. I was like, who the hell is this guy? And but on the bright side, like he's gone after like what, episode 4 or episode 3. He's like doesn't. I mean,
episode 4, yeah.
4, yeah, episode 4. Like he, I don't know. Yeah, he's probably the one character I didn't love. But then he was gone, and then the show got really good, and he wasn't there. But he also, like, I don't think his presence brings the show down that much. Like, I don't think he ruins anything. I don't think he particularly adds to the show either, though. Like, I don't know that he really did need to be there. But ultimately, I don't mind him because he's gone for the last 2 episodes. So if he had played a big part of the finale, then I probably would be a little bit more annoyed. But he's gone after episode 4, so good riddance, whatever. But yeah, if he hadn't been there, I think it would have been fine.
I think, well, just as a counterpoint, I just thought of this, occurred to me that maybe what he brought to the show was the aspect of the hunters who want to just go back to their original timeline, who want to go back to, who know their variant and they just want just to live on the timeline, forget about the TVA. Kind of like that one guy from the Matrix who wanted to live in the Matrix and like fuck the rebels or whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, I would have sympathized with that position more if he wasn't such a dick. I mean, if they're gonna have that position, like they should have someone who's not a dick. So maybe the audience can empathize with that position a little more. But the show really plays it like, no, that guy is a total dick. He's totally wrong. He should just get his ass back to the TVA. That's kind of the way that the show played it. So they didn't. That's what they were going for. I don't think they did it very effectively.
Yes, to all your main points for both of you, really. No, in fact, they introduced him in episode 1 as, hey, X5, we don't see you down here a whole lot. How's it going? And that was the one thing that they kind of gave you the hint of like, no, we're going to play like this guy's been around the whole time, but no, you haven't seen him. And I totally missed that like the first time to really pay attention. But also, when we get to episode 2, didn't realize that was Brad. I thought this was this whole other story that was suddenly being told. And then I had to realize, oh, this is the guy from back in the, okay. And no, the problem you have of the feeling of whether his story is important is he's basically the MacGuffin that allows us to get Sylvie by the end of the episode or by the midpoint of the episode. And then, have the big battle against Docs and all those blowing up the timeline. And that's really it. To be a little bit of a dick, to kind of be that brief little bridge in episode 4. But the problem that, again, this is one of the small problems I do have with the season is it's not only him, but it's even Renslayer and Ms. Minutes and Docs and everybody else is none of them mean anything because none of them contribute to how the story is eventually fixed, how the issue is eventually overcome, which is just the time slipping outside of saying that these experiences are part of what contributes to Loki's, pathway, which allows him to make all of these choices. But ultimately, we lose all of Renslayer's even, and I know we'll get to that, motivations and things, or what she was doing, or why they picked Timely, or what the point is with all of that, or what was Brad's point is, because ultimately, they are the filler to lay the groundwork for Loki's final evolution and such. So, yeah, I was up until the last episode going to say that this is the greatest episode of single episode of Star Trek that's ever been made, because it felt extremely episodic. Like we're going to start at a point, and by the time we end, we're going to be like exactly the same point. And I love the change of expectations to go, no, we're going to wrap this up in a very unexpected way. But still, overall, many of the things that happened, while cool, felt inconsequential, and Brad or X5, I think, is an example of that.
Well, I guess that's where we're gonna have to disagree.
No!
I thought every episode was poignant, and you used the word, was it filler? Along the way, I would have used the word, it's the steps, it's the build up along the way.
I like that better.
I wouldn't dismiss it as irrelevant, and so that actually feeds into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which was in fact Renslayer and Miss Minutes, which I thought were used very well this season. I think I was also thrown off a bit how they kind of just drop off after episode 4, but ultimately I'm okay with it because episode 5 and 6 were weird in its own thing and more focused on the character of Loki. And so I think to throw them in there, probably it wasn't necessary and it would have interfered with the character story they were telling with Loki. But I thought she was a really good foil for Loki for the first 4 episodes, or I guess episode 3 and 4, because she didn't even pop up till episode 3. But she was, even though she wasn't in the first 2 episodes, it was looming. It was like, where is Renslayer? It was just like this looming threat that was in the background. And then when you see her, you see that she's, and this actually does fit well with season 1, because at the end of season 1, we see that Miss Minutes had like a mission for her, and we see that it was all part of He Who Remains' plan to throw the loop into Succession that gives Victor Timely as a child the TVA books, which leads to him to, leads to everything, and the TVA being created and everything. And yeah, I think I like how they did Miss Minutes this season. They turned her into a full-on psychopath, which I think was a natural progression from season 1, because she's already starting to get a bit scary and creepy towards the end of season 1, and then they really went with that even further, and how she was just started like threw Renslayer off the boat because like, oh fuck her, and then started like hitting on Victor Timely hard out in a very creepy way. It's like, you're gonna give me a body, and he's like, okay, fuck this, let's get out of here. And then of course, in episode 4 comes back and like smushes, like murders all those people just for not joining them, and she's like smiling like psychopathically while it's happening. It's like, god damn. And so I like that. And I also thought her death was very fucking creepy as well. And I like how they, the Ouroboros figured out how to reboot her program and get rid of her. But right as she died, she was like glitching. And then she was like said to Victor, was like, you'll never be him. And like this weird shape and just popped. I thought that was very ominous. So I love the way that these characters were used. Maybe slightly disappointed that we didn't see Renslayer. We saw at the very end, and it looked like she was going to be eaten by that thing, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think she will be she will be in future iterations, if not Loki. I don't think there'll be a season 3 Loki, but I think we'll see her in other stuff, maybe with Kang. And I heard some theories about how that might happen. But yeah, it feels like there was open-ended, that they were implying something further with her. So ultimately, even though I wanted to see more of her, ultimately I'm okay with it because I thought everything worked out well. The one thing I really want to see more of is when Loki went back in time and he was listening to the recording of Renslayer and Kang talking to each other. And of course, we saw this again when Miss Minutes showed Renslayer like the visual recording of this and how they were congratulating her for helping him to win the war. I kind of want to see this war now. I want to see them meeting together. I want to see what the relation, and maybe we'll get this in other movies. Maybe this is actually like the future compared to where other movies are at, and maybe the other movies or shows will get to a point where we see Renslayer and Kang teaming up and winning this war. I kind of want to see that. Anyway, Darrin, we'll start with you on Renslayer.
You're right when she was that her presence was looming over the previous story because it was waiting to what mission they're on, what's going to happen. And yes, some of the more exciting and also more frustrating, because I was expecting kind of a bigger story where she was carrying on this project and then she gets pruned and then eaten by Azeroth at the end, or, about to be. Not yet. We don't see the body go. So yes, they can always continue something. I loved her in it. I just wanted to see more. And Miss Minutes, the same thing. You're right. Tara Strong's freaking just amazing playing Miss Minutes, doing the voice of Miss Minutes. And that psychotic make me a body hitting on Victor Timely, as well as her psychotic joy of seeing the TVA guards get smushied in the cube, was just, I think, some brilliant storytelling. And definitely, I think these are things that made the characters really shine for the small amount of time that we had them. And I think, again, this is just one of those, to me, ideas is, I think there was expectations of this other story, and then this is the story that got brought, and it was so good. That's what they went with, and I'm glad that they did. Again, with all of my detractions, I don't want to pull back or make it say that I didn't think they did an amazing job this season. But this is one of those things where we're hoping for more of the lead into the multiversal war, this background, these kind of stories overlaying, and they just kind of touch on them and move them aside so they could focus on Loki, which is a great move because that's the name of the show, Loki. So it should be focused on him. I do hope that they can use these elements later on, whether it be in the Kang Dynasty movie or other things. And because the TVA is out of time, you can still have a Renslayer show up, even from the past, a previous Renslayer coming in and dealing with things, or way in the past when she was with Kang, or in the future if she does manage to escape, Azeroth there, as they leave in her final scene in the finale. So, yeah, I just would have liked to have seen more, but I think what they did with the characters was beautiful and used very well.
Miss Minutes is the stuff of my nightmares. Like, forget Freddy Krueger, Mike Myers, all that bullshit. Like, fucking Miss Minutes. She is so creepy. And I'm sorry, but I felt a little unsettled at the end of the season when they bring her back and 100B15 was like, are you sure she's not gonna? And Obi's like, what, kill us all? She's like, yeah. And he goes, eh. I'm like, really? That is not reassuring. Like, no, don't bring her back online. Like, what are you doing? Like, I'm so terrified for them now. Like, Mr. Minutes is so scary. But yeah, so loved her in the season. Yeah, I actually wanted Renslayer to be gone after episode 4 because she didn't fit anymore. She served her purpose. She was there to be the antagonist for the 3rd and 4th episode, and I think she worked in that role. I think she needed to be there. I think Miss Minutes needed to be there, but I don't think they needed to be there in episodes 5 and 6 because they went off in a different direction. We are now focusing on Loki's story. I don't see how Renslayer gets in there. Like, I think she would be there for the sake of being there. So I would rather not be there at all. So I think what they did with her was perfect. I do hope that she survives. I do think that, and yeah, we didn't see a body, so we can't make any assumptions. So I think that she should play a role in future projects, even if it is just the past version of her. I don't know, Mark, that you're going to get your wish to see her and Kang or He Who Remains winning the war. I don't know that we'll see that, but you can hope. I don't I don't know. But I do feel like we haven't seen the last of Renslayer, even if we see her in the past. But I also think that she's not dead yet. I think we will see her more. So for the purposes of this show, I feel like she served her purpose, and I don't know how she would have fit into episodes 5 and 6. So I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah, it's the thing about Miss Minutes is funny because in the first couple episodes of season 1, she was just like it was originally a playoff of like Mr. DNA from Jurassic Park, and it was just like this fun thing, and then they turned her to a full on like psychopathic AI. I'm like, Jesus Christ.
You know what she reminds me of, or actually, she reminds me of the better version of what they were trying to do with Badgie. Like, I think she's a better Badgie from Star Trek Lower Decks.
Yeah, we all know I didn't like Badgie, but yeah. I love Miss Minutes. Yeah, it's a better version. I could definitely see that. Yeah. All right, so next thing. All right, so I'm going to channel Ryan George with the pitch meeting for a moment, where he says, I'll be a writer guy being like, okay, so Sylvie travels back in time and she has a nice time. She finds a cafe to stay at, and then producer guy pops in and was like, making the McDonald's. McDonald's wants to give us lots of money. We need money. We need our product placement. Making McDonald's. Okay, Sylvie hangs out at a McDonald's.
Be sure to bring up some of their bigger menu items, just to remind people that they can still get Big Macs and chicken McNuggets.
You know, he might actually do that. He hasn't released his picture.
Oh, right, true.
So he may actually do that joke.
You saw it here first. We beat him to the punch.
Do you know, I actually read before Loki season 2 came out that they redid a McDonald's in New York City to make it look like it was from 1982, as in like a tie-in to Loki. And when I read about it, I was like, why are they making an 82 McDonald's? But then I saw they had like a Loki poster. I was like, oh, it must have something to do with Loki. So when it showed up, I was like, oh, okay, that's... And like the menu board and everything looked exactly like 1982. So yeah.
An excellent recreation. It really brought me back.
But yeah, I think I like the way they did Sylvie this season. I think it was very mysterious at first, where she wasn't there and it was a search for her. But then you saw in that future flash forward where Loki went to the future in the first episode. She saw her in the elevator and like, well, so what's the deal? And then her motivation, I think, her character story was very strong. Totally fit with season 1, because season 1 she established she never had a life. She was always on the run. So, and her main objective was to kill he who remains so she could have a life. And so that's what she wants to do. They just show her going back in time, finding a spot, McDonald's in Oklahoma, because you need that product placement money, but by hanging out and just wanting to live her life, and that's her main motivation. She does get caught up a bit into the Loki trying to save the TVA, but for most, just because it's going to wipe out all of existence, so she has no choice because she wants to exist. But even like in the episode 5 timeline, she's like, why you just keep trying to save everything? Just don't worry about it, and wants to chill out and relax. I think we'll get to her conversation with Loki in the finale a bit later, because that ties into what I want to talk about later. But thoughts on Sylvie's storyline? Alyssa, we'll start with you.
One of my favorite scenes of the season, and just in general, one of my favorite scenes is when she is like on the couch with the headphones listening to one of my favorite albums of all time, honestly, Velvet Underground Loaded album, and Oh Sweet Nothing, in which the lyrics fit in so perfectly. And she's sitting there and like how like she's oblivious, like everything's getting spaghetti-fied around her with the record spinning. The way that was done was so good.
I just want to say that's one of the scenes I mentioned, I was talking about at the start, where it's just like almost gave me the tears. It was such a good scene.
Yeah, that was such a good scene. And prior to that, I was like, she was unconvinced and she was not going to move. And she's like, fuck you, Loki. Go get out of here. Like, just go live a life, whatever. And I was like, how's she going to change her mind? Obviously, she's going to end up back with them somehow, right? And then that scene happened. And I was like, oh, okay. This is what we're doing here. But yeah, I do agree. Her storyline overall was pretty strong. And it does kind of go right off of season 1. She was at first, at the beginning of the season, I was like, not quite sure how she's fitting in here, but I do think that they did pull it off with this character. And you're right, she was just doing what she said she wanted to do in season 1, and pesky Loki is trying to save the universe and mess with that, and so that all worked for me. And yeah, you said we'll talk about that ending scene later, so I'll save that. But I thought there were a lot of good moments for Sylvie in this season.
All right, Darrin, your thoughts?
I love Sylvie. I think she's a great character. I love how they did sort of bring her back. I love the back and forth between her and Loki. We have some of the bigger, I think, evolutions of the character, not only that final scene, which we will get into, but even one of the previous ones where they're talking about how do we deal with these timelines and what do we have to do when they're in the TVA. And she was like, we're not, how are we supposed to do this? And I think he makes the lines of like, because we're gods. Or she says, we're not gods. Like, yes, we are gods. We do have to sometimes take our positions and go on. And it was one of the nice actual like foreshadowings of where things eventually good, that is where Loki would eventually head to oversee and to take care. And that is the position that he is. If they're going to free the timelines, they have to be responsible for them. And I love the back and forth as we have with Sylvie, who, you're right, is like, look, I ran my whole life and now I just want to live a life. Just find a place, be left alone, and live a life. And that gives her a certain clarity about everything that she's after. And I love even the shift that they allow her in dealing with the He Who Remains variant when she runs into Timely, and her incessant pursuit to kill him, but in the end is unable to because he is the result of what she wants. Let the timelines go, let them be free, let these people have their choice. And now she's realizing that she can't stop this choice from this other person. This isn't who she was after. This is exactly what she wanted to free and allow to happen. And I think it's a great bit for her to then kind of move on and have those nice clarity of view discussions with Loki that everything ends up turning on.
Yeah, and I think in that moment that she was about to kill him, and he was just like, you don't know who I am, and he's begging for his life. That she saw herself. She saw that she had become the hunter that was going to kill her when she was just an innocent person, and she couldn't bring herself to do it.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. It was a beautifully done moment, and on all of those things, and we could see that on her face, which was just, perfect.
And I think they actually played off of the romance between Loki and her that was established in season 1 very well, because they didn't bring it to a full on like romance with them like being in love ever after or whatever, because that's just weird. It's another version of them, but they did, like, their connection was a central important part of the story. It was like, and I think now he said how he did this for everyone in the Save TVA. He at first said I'm doing this for you to Sylvie, and then all of you. So I think his connection with her was like one of the most important things, and that he could connect with her and her desire to just live.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. I think that's beautifully said. They're almost like the relationship of an old married couple at this point.
Yeah.
Where it's just, they just know each other, or maybe even like divorced people that just went on in different directions in their life. They still know everything about each other, and there's still that connection. And therefore that allows that honesty, especially from Loki. He can be ultimately honest with Sylvie, and she's going to be ultimately honest with him, because she can't stand the bullshit, and he knows that he can't really fool her.
And I think she was a good foil for him, and plus, like, putting down, like, going off on Mobius when he wanted to eat key lime pie. It's like, pie! Freaking out. But she was like a good foil for him, constantly challenging him on why he wanted to save the TVA. Like, why are you doing this? Why is this? And it's really making him think. And I think that's what really pushed the story forward. So let's talk about Victor Timely. I said actually episode 3 was kind of my least favorite, even though I still liked it. I still thought it was a really great episode. To me, it was moving a bit slower than the other episodes, because we were, back in time looking for Timely for most of the time. But I think it was, as I said, I still liked it though, because I thought it was still this eeriness to this like race of Renslayer and Miss Minutes against Loki and Mobius trying to get to Victor Timely first, and how it's like going back and forth. And but Victor Timely, I don't know, that's interesting. He was, of course, teased in the post-credit scenes of Ant-Man Quantumania. And it's not really, I'm still, to be honest, a bit confused of where he fits in with how he connects to King and who remains. But it was interesting because he's definitely like this earlier version of King who, doesn't know anything, is actually kind of a good guy and ultimately trying to help them. So yeah, ultimately, I mean, I'm just confused a little bit by his role in the greater picture, but I still think he was like a good element, added a lot to the show, and especially him hanging out with OB and them like being besties or whatever was interesting. Alyssa, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on Victor Timely?
First of all, just for the record, episode 2 was my least favorite, the one with the Hunter X5 that we were talking about earlier. Yeah. Episode 3, I was like, oh, we're getting back into it. But as for Victor Timely, I don't really quite understand him either, but it's just, I'm just kind of like, whatever. Like, I just don't want to hurt my brain that much. So it's, he's a King variant that somehow exists in the 19th century, and I'm just rolling with that. I don't, yeah, I just can't think too hard on who he is. I'm just gonna let that one go. But yeah, it was definitely an interesting character, and yeah, not what I expected. And the post-credit scene from Ant-Man and the Wasp was, I believe, if I recall correctly, just ripped directly out of Loki. It was literally a scene from Loki that they just plopped in, which is something Marvel used to do more often. They don't really do it much anymore, where they take something from another project, a scene, and just put it in as their post-credit scene. But he was not what I was expecting after that post-credit scene. I guess I was expecting something a little more devious, which does show that there can be variants of King who are good. But yeah, I don't know what else to say about this character.
I think, yeah. Again, trying to understand Victor Timely and the connection, because we generally see Kang as from the future, and that's what gives him the technology to do all of the things that he does. I don't know. I think here you could easily say that variations can happen generally in the same time, but also in other times. And if Renslayer never went back with Miss Minutes and gave him a copy of the TVA guidebook, would he have been able to create any of the things that would have had an impact that the Victor Timely that we see now happen? Probably not. He would have been a Kang variant that blipped up and disappeared without making that big of an impact. I think this is a way of creating issues while still not revealing anything about Kang or those types of variants themselves. Also, like I had mentioned before, in regards to the TVA and time paradox weirdness, I'll buy it all. Okay, OB was influenced by the work of Victor Timely, who created things because he had a copy of the TVA guidebook that was written by Ouroboros. Yeah, let that work around in your brain for a little bit. Doesn't make, but it's the TVA, and to me, I'll just go with it. I'll let it make sense. Timeline is dropped in an instant, all up and down, and it's not a single line that goes and connects. It's an instantly formed creation. So yeah, I'm trying to wrap my brain out of all of this. It's fine. It was just, to me, an interesting way of seeing this variant and this character, and what Jonathan Majors could do with a character that won't have any larger impact on anything else. Again, it keeps the story all very contained for the most part, and doesn't rely on or necessarily influence anything else unless they later on choose to do it.
Yeah, and it's implied at the end of the show that he does in fact never get the TVA handbook, and doesn't do doesn't become Victor Timeless, I guess he's just another variant who does nothing, and there's other variants in other timelines. Because it's interesting that when they showed Renslayer go back in time to give him the TVA handbook, it said the sacred timeline. But then when they went forward to the World's Fair, it said variant is like whatever
branch timeline.
Timeline, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe in the sacred timeline he didn't get the book, and that was a branch timeline that they create. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the Victor Timely that we saw did exist, so there was still a branch timeline that he did exist. But then, and it seemed to me like they were just showing a different timeline where he doesn't exist, because there's so many timelines now that.
Yeah, or is he really a King variant, or just a King ancestor that looks a lot like him, or has a lot of those characters?
They seem to imply he was a King variant.
Yeah, well, they had to, because he had to have his aura do it. Yeah.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I don't know. But I don't know. Darrin just made me think. I just love the scene. We'll probably get to this later because this is the finale. But when Loki is trying to rush through things, and he goes to Victor Timely, "Hey, you both wrote the TVA manual. Isn't that amazing? Let's move forward. Let's go." He doesn't want to give them the time to be like, "Oh my God, you wrote the book because I wrote the book." He's like, "You both wrote it. Isn't that amazing?" Keep going.
So yeah, I want to get a bit more in episode 4 when they're had the big confrontation with Renslayer and Miss Minutes, and they're trying to save the loom. And I like how OB. I just needed to point out how they did like a callback to Doc Brown from Back to the Future with like the model and being like, "Oh, please excuse this model. It's not to scale." And there's like a giant sign in the background that says "not to scale" with like a TVA logo on it.
I only got one coat of paint on it.
Yeah.
I actually did not catch the Back to the Future reference until someone pointed it out to me. I did not remember that Doc Brown did that as well. But
yeah, I remember that he was always he had this like perfectly great model. It's like, "Oh, please excuse the." But yeah, and another one of my favorite movies. I don't know. I want to ask how you guys feel about the callback to episode 1 where we see Loki go in the future and he's pruned. We don't know who pruned him. And then episode 4 we see it was his, future self that pruned him. I mean, that's just seemed novelty to me. It didn't seem like vital to the story. It didn't seem like a big, gotcha moment. Oh, it was future him. Okay, whatever. And then the mysterious of the phone ringing, we saw, whoa, who was on the phone? It was just Ouroboros telling them to hurry up. So it seemed a little bit anticlimactic to me, just a tad.
I don't know if you're gonna like, this isn't you, Mark, but there's all these YouTube channels that I watch that are like, "Oh, who's on the phone? Let's come up with 25 insane theories and put them in our YouTube video." I just didn't care. Like, honestly, like if the phone call is just OB calling him and saying, "Tell him to hurry up," fine. Like, I honestly was not I guess I was never invested in who was making the phone call. I don't know that the show wanted you to be invested. I just feel like the fans like make a big deal about it, and so then you think you're supposed to be invested. But I don't know that the show ever wanted me to care about it, because I certainly never did. And then the future Loki pruning himself, I think that was just kind of like a loose end they needed to tie up, because otherwise it would have been like, "Woo, prune Loki, we'll never know. Let's do a video where we have 30 theories about it." So that was just kind of a like, let's just tie up that loose end. It is what it is. Like, let's move on. Like, I don't know. I guess some people did seem disappointed in that, but I just didn't care. I was like, I mean, I kind of do want to know. I think that's something you can't just leave hanging out there. You got to tie it up some way, but I didn't need it to be some big thing, I guess. So for me, it was like, whatever. But yeah, that's my take on it.
Well, I would say, like, even before I watched those videos, I was interested in, I thought it was a mystery of who was on the phone, but I wasn't as like, gung ho about, oh, there's 30 theories. Who's it? And like, I wasn't. That was too much for me. But I was intrigued. I was like, I wonder who's on that phone.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a couple of ways you could look at it. I mean, one, it's just a way for Loki, future Loki, to see that everything does work its way out. But you're right; it's a nice way of kind of closing that little loop. They did an interesting choice, and then they reflected on it later on. I did always think it was odd that he was able to keep a hold of that clock that told him when he needed to prune himself, but he couldn't hold on to the actual pruning stick.
Yeah.
Which is like, and then he couldn't find one, which I'm like, in the TVA, aren't they everywhere? But again, I don't know. So yeah, well, again, that was kind of cool. It was also in a way kind of unnecessary, though. I did a little discussion with Rob over on Smirking Reviews for episode 4, where I did manage to bring up that my only guess is why they had this is to give a hint that it's Loki's time traveling that will inevitably solve this problem. Because, of course, at the end of the episode, they all die. Or it appears that they all die.
Yeah.
And to me, that was the only thing. And considering that, in a way, it is Loki's time traveling that does end up being kind of the solution to it all. I can't say that it was useless, because that's what I thought when I saw the scene is, oh, maybe that's what they were implying. And it sort of ended up being that way. So, I mean, in a way, that carries that forward, and it does keep the series in its sort of self-contained area. We saw Chekhov's gun beforehand, and now it goes off in episode 4. But again, it's like a lot of the stuff. There's almost like there's a lot of cutesy things in here that may or may not mean anything, but are still cool to see.
Yeah. Maybe I was a victim of too much expectations. I was expecting something more. But yeah, I was going to mention one of my favorite moments in the show was when Ouroboros was talking to Sylvie and Loki on the phone, and trying to figure out how to defeat Miss Minutes. And he's like, "Oh, I could reboot the system, but that's going to take everything down. It's going to stop the magic block." And Loki and Sylvie yelling in unison, "Turn it off!"
That was awesome. Yes.
And it was actually cool getting them to see their magic, because I kind of forgot about the fact that they couldn't use magic in the TVA. And I was like, yeah, it was actually cool getting them to see them use it in there. And I don't know, they defeated X5 and Renslayer really easily after that once they had their magic, but whatever, it wasn't the main point. But then, yeah, I think, Alyssa, you mentioned earlier about how they all died at the end of episode 4, which was shocking. I did not expect that to happen. I made a comparison to The Leftovers, how they did International Assassin, where, they all died, and I'm like, what the hell are they going to do after this? And they ended up going in a weird, abstract way. But before we get to that, I don't know if either of you had anything more to say about the that death moment or anything.
I don't.
No, but you're right. Seeing Timely just spaghettify right there was
like, oh god,
what?
Yeah, it made this really creepy noise. I was like, what is going? Yeah, no, that was. Yeah, it was a big what the fuck moment for sure.
Yeah, because I think this is great because of episode 1. We already saw Mobius go out there and like, oh yeah, they're gonna do it again. He's gonna go out there and he's gonna save the day, but he just walks out and goes, ah! And it's like, what the hell? All right, so yeah, let's talk about episode 5 of Loki time slipping to see his friends or whatever. And I really think this was a really great episode. I heard that the writers were saying that they had a totally different idea from episode 5 originally. Apparently episode 6 would have been the same, but they had going to do something totally different for episode 5, and they were talking about how everyone in the writer's staff was saying this is going to be the best episode. This is clearly the best thing we ever written. It's such a masterpiece. And in the big woods at Margle were like, no, you can't do it, and told them to completely scrap it and do something different. Now, I don't know what that is, and I'm kind of upset that nobody knows what this scrapped idea is. I really want to know. And I think it's kind of useless to speculate because we have no idea. But that being said, I heard people commenting on this and saying, "Oh yeah, I could tell episode 5 was something they just came up with on the weekend. I could tell that it didn't that they just came up with something and it didn't really work," which I totally disagree with. I think it's bullshit. Episode 5 was actually one of my favorites. I think what they did do was very sort of mind bending and like unexpected. And I think it was actually great. I mean, come on, you saw Mobius on a jet ski. Finally, like who cares if it wasn't in the water? We still saw him on the jet ski, and yeah, seeing like the different the versions of these characters and the different variants, as you mentioned, Darrin, they got the escape from Alcatraz with Casey instead, and the way these characters interacted with each other was pretty funny. But the most important thing is how they explored Loki's character, and they did it in such a weird, abstract way as well. And we already mentioned the scenes with him and Sylvie. And Sylvie really pushing him to admit to himself that why he was really doing it, because he wanted to be with his friends, and then you still got this sense of hopelessness at the end where they all started spaghettifying, like everything was spaghettifying, and then that's when Loki finally got the motivation, figured out how to time slip. I thought that was amazing. Darrin, we'll start with you for this.
Not only did he say he didn't want to lose his friends, he didn't want to be alone.
Yes. Yeah,
which is even more interesting considering where he does end up being, which is alone and never alone, I guess you could possibly say, depending on how you interpret his position.
So that brings up an interesting thing that was pointed out to me, because from season 1, when he was in that time loop with Lady Sith, like punching him and repeatedly saying the same thing. The same thing that she said to him repeatedly was, "You will always be alone." And that's something that he really didn't want.
Yeah. So I mean, so there's kind of an interesting thing, and I mean, who knows what their original grand and glorious, we would have all been fawning idea that never got allowed to see will be. I don't know. He's talking to Garfield the cat for the entire hour. It was a fascinating discussion. But yeah, this is obviously the Loki introspection bit. Everyone's done. He's the only one that's there. He has to find a way to fix it. But ultimately, he is looking at all of these different aspects of himself as reflected by each of these characters in order to come to the truth within himself of what needs to be done. And in that sense, yeah, it's beautifully done. The episode does exactly what it wants to do. Even if you had a great and amazing episode, though, it would suffer by the same point, is that anything within this episode is effectively self-contained, because it's just him traveling up and through time and checking out things and doing all that, which is, again, the show is named Loki. It's about his story and it's about his exploration. Within that, we do get the kind of fun fan service, and we get to see Mobius on a jet ski and what his life is like. And I think a few people have made a comparison as to him to Odin and his kids to Thor and Loki. I didn't really see a whole lot, so I'm not really sure how to pull all of those things out of it. That would be kind of an interesting interpretation of all of that. Again, it's just nice to see, Mobius in his original element, and there's always a great character interaction between him and Tom Hiddleston, him and Loki, which is always fun to see. To get to see these little bits of remnants and where they came from and what they were like. And you'd mentioned before, Ouroboros, OB is the quickest to be like, oh, okay, so this is what's going on. All right, we'll figure this out. Yeah, I think it was 19 months before he was able to invent the temp pad, his little wonky temp pad that was kind of moving around, which, again, just sort of a fun bit. So this was a great character story, and him gathering the people he needs, even though these aren't the people, these are variants, and whether they're original the variants that they got pulled back from or not, these are only really reflections of the people, which I think he does realize kind of at the end, which allows him to have those moments. So I think the episode did a great job in exploring all these little stories and these character interactions and these facets of Loki. And again, that big honest moment between him and Sylvie, I think, which was all perfect. But yeah, then it was like, okay, now it's all gone, and now we're going to do the finale straight off. So again, all of these were great stories, and I enjoyed them all so much, but there was all that hesitancy, like how much of any of this is playing forward, or how much is, again, just Loki. Which again, his name's on the title, it's his story. That is who we should focus on.
All right, Alyssa, your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't have any idea what this mysterious, like, this is the greatest story we ever wrote is, but I honestly, I don't know how it could have been better. I'll be perfectly honest with you. This episode, I've already mentioned some of my favorite moments that come from this episode. The Sylvie listening to Velvet Underground, that whole scene, the Sylvie and Loki scene at the bar, and that was just such an important scene, and that just really hit me right here. And then, yeah, I've talked. I keep talking about this episode a lot earlier in this video because I talked about Obi in this episode. To me, Mobius riding the jet ski was the least like. It's like, okay, I want him to ride a jet ski so everybody else can be happy about it. And if you aren't happy about it because it wasn't on the water, he's just. And I mean, I don't care about that stuff, honestly. Like, that's fine if other people want to, be happy or not happy whether Mobius rides a jet ski. But I do think, I mean, they needed to have a jet ski involved in some way because they did set it up that way. It would be wonky writing. It wouldn't be great writing if there wasn't a jet ski involved in his life in some way because they have set that up. But I didn't feel like I needed to see him on the water in a jet ski or anything like that. There really wasn't anything that disappointed me about this episode. And I mean, I don't know, Darrin, we're talking about episodic. I see this as kind of a bridge between episodes 4 and 6. Like, this is the connecting, it's the bridge that connects how we end up at the end of episode 4, and then we end up in episode 6 with Loki now trying to continually try to fix what happened in episode 4. I think you needed to get into those character moments. I think you needed to have those moments that we had in episode 5 to connect those two. I don't think you can go straight from episode 4 to episode 6. And I am mildly curious what this greatest thing we ever wrote thing was, but I honestly, like, I'm just curious because I wonder if I would even think that it was better than what they did. Yeah. Because I kind of think what they did was pretty damn good.
Yeah, I honestly, I think this is the international assassin of Loki season 2. All right, so getting into the finale, we get Loki's Groundhog Day, which is it seemed like it was evoking that Groundhog's Day mentality, where he's repeating it. I like the way that they paced this, the way that they showed it, because we start the episode off with seeing him go to Victor Timely dying over and over again. And again, you talked about that horrifying noise, but we get to see it like over and over and over again from different angles. And that music, the mess with the Beethoven version, disco version, or whatever that they had, they played over the montage was actually perfect. But I liked how it was paced because we get him trying that over and over again, and then you go back to he realizes that he is not faster. They have to go earlier, so he goes back and he's like, "Miss Bennett, can you help us?" And she just blinks at him, and that didn't work. And so he goes back even earlier. And you already talked about Alyssa, how he was just like, "Oh, Victor Timely, there's OB. Oh, you wrote the TVA bill. You both wrote it. Isn't that amazing? Okay, now let's go." And so the rest of the thing was him like just going pace and pace, and then he was like, "How long will it take to teach me all this, everything you know about, everything?" They're like, decades? No, centuries. And then the time card flashes centuries later. That is a very bold ass move. I can't think of any other show or movie that would risk doing that. Just be like, centuries later, like that all passes. And then we go back and we see him. And I like how they skip over the loops this time. They go straight to the final loop. And we see that Loki already knows everything, that he's already been through this like billions of times. It's like, okay, Victor Timely going to go out there, make sure your helmet's on straight, make sure you don't set the thing down because it's going to fall down, because you know that he knows all this stuff because he's experienced it in previous loops. And I like that. We don't need to see those loops. They just jump to the ending. We get it. And he like predicts what Mobius is going to say is like, "Oh, he's coming for you. It's like, coming for your job. Yes, I'm a coming." And he's just like very like speed up. "Come on, let's move. And pushing them on there. And everyone's like, "Why is Loki acting like this all of a sudden?" But that was great. But then you get another moment. Like we talked about how shocking it was at the end of episode 4 that they all died, but I thought I was equally as shocked when he finally pulls it off and they still all die, which was I did not see coming. So yeah, let me get your thoughts on this part so far, because I thought it was amazing. Alyssa, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much to add because I kind of just agree, like what you said, basically. Yeah, I did also appreciate how we didn't need to see him go through all the time loops. We didn't need to see Mobius say he's coming for your job 100 times. We got the idea that he did, and Tom Hiddleston played it so well. He was so good at that. Like, "Oh, yeah, coming from your job. Yes, I'm a coming." And, "Okay, listen, you guys both wrote the same book. Isn't that amazing?" Now let's move forward. He did such a great job of playing that we totally got the idea. Oh, okay, so Loki has been through this a bunch of times. And yes, I agree. That was equally as shocking, that because you expect your heroes to succeed in what they are trying to accomplish. This is what we have been conditioned to for years and years and decades and centuries of stories. That's what happens. So for them to go in a different direction there, and for it to still work, and for them to still stick the landing in the end, that is what makes it great for me, because you can try to subvert expectations, you can try to shock people, and then not stick the landing, and then it just doesn't work, and then you're like, you should have just done the cliche thing there. But the fact that they were able to pull it off at the end with a very new, interesting ending that we weren't expecting, that's what really makes that moment great for me, is that we weren't expecting it and it was shocking, but then what ends up happening, it ends up being really good too.
Yeah. Well, again, I referenced our time loop movie discussion that we had ages ago, or TVs and shows. And this was a beautiful example of something like that done very well. You're right. Tries it one way, then has to go in earlier, then has to change. I can definitely say it was the moment that he was like, that time card came up centuries later, where he knows everything. I'm like, okay, we're not going to, this is what I was doubting. We're going to see this version of Loki again. Because I'm like, all right, he's already OP. If he can control his time slipping, plus he knows everything about how the TVA, where do you take this character now? So at that point, it definitely felt like they were going towards some sort of end trajectory. And you're right. When he comes back and does the whole breakdown, I told you, don't set it down. It's going to roll off the edge of the gangway. Yeah, you're right. We know that he's already seen all of these things before. We don't need to see those steps. We get it. And I think that was beautifully done. And you're right. The fact that he goes through all of those bits and then it all still ends and blows up in their face is the shocking, like, okay, none of this approach is going to work. I have to find something else to do. So it was, again, it's like you succeeded in what you were doing, but you failed in hitting your goal. Now you have to switch things around, which I think was a great way of moving through all of these and then still giving us a good amount of time to actually deal with how we're going to find the solution to this problem.
No, I thought. Oh, sorry.
No. Go ahead.
So I thought it was a great transition from Sylvie realizing, oh, we're all doomed the moment I killed He Who Remains. Like there was no way to then, and they immediately transitioned to seeing Sylvie in slow motion going from the finale of season 1 going to kill He Who Remains. And I was like, that makes so much sense. That would be exactly where he goes next, because he wants to try to stop her. And again, we get another sort of Groundhog Day moment where he repeats this over and over again. And I like how they emphasize every time her constantly saying, you're going to have, if you want to stop me, you have to kill me. Saying that over and over again, to making it clear that is the outline, that is the only way to stop the loop. And I like how he all of a sudden just, turns to He Who Remains. It's like, why aren't you just trying to stop her? And then he, or this time or something like that, they make it clear that he's time slipping. So He Who Remains stops time and has this conversation, which I think was very amazing, very eerie conversation. But I'm confused. It makes my head hurt a bit. I'm not sure. Like, I guess I get the gist of it, that it seems that his plan is that he wants Loki to kill her, and that everything he experienced in season 2 was all part of his plan to make Loki master his time slipping and bring him to the conclusion that the only way to get what he wants is to kill Sylvie, which is kind of a conclusion that that he came to himself after the loom didn't work. So yeah,
but outside of the torture of having Loki killed Sylvie, what does that accomplish? It saves He Who Remains, but then Loki's supposed to be his lieutenant to just hang out.
Yeah, that's where I was a bit confused. Was that
again? This is where they're mushing stuff into things that don't exactly fit. But
so I didn't see it that way at all.
Okay.
I did not interpret it that way even a little bit. But you said that in your review, and I was like, that's not how I saw it. I saw it as I win either way. It's a win-win situation for me. You kill her, then I'm still alive. You don't kill her, the time loom does the job. I win either. I think he gets what he wants either way. I don't think he gives a shit whether Loki kills her or not, because it's a win-win for him. Doesn't matter what Loki does.
But okay, but he talked about how, do you think I would just let her kill me? It's reincarnation, right, baby. But I took that to mean that he knew he wanted Loki to kill her eventually, and throughout.
No, that's not how I took it at all. Took it as...
All right, here's a question: if Loki doesn't kill her and she kills He Who Remains, and the time loom does its thing, how does that work out for him, since he would be dead at this stage?
Well, I don't think he really is dead. I don't think we know the answer to how it is that he gets his reincarnation. I don't think the show has explained that yet. But I think he clearly believes that he's fine whether she kills him or not. I don't think the audience has been told exactly how that's going to work out for him. But the way that I read it is like, she kills him, he's still fine. She doesn't kill him, he's still fine. Like, that's how he is. That's how I read his actions.
Okay. I mean, that's how I read his actions in season 1. But in the season 2 finale, I got the impression that he wanted to live and wanted Loki to kill Sylvie.
No, because I really got the impression like the reincarnation thing that like if she kills him, because he was like, do you really think that I would let her kill me and then with no plan? Because so I just assumed, yeah, he's coming back in some way, like, and it has nothing to do with whether Loki kills Sylvie or not.
Well,
I don't think that he remains would ever believe that Loki would be capable of killing Sylvie. Like, I don't think he would have that expectation. I don't think he would hinge his plan on Loki being capable of killing Sylvie, because I think he would know that Loki's not going to kill Sylvie.
I don't know. It seemed to me he was trying to convince her.
Yeah, because he even said, all right, just we'll meet back in another few million loops that you have to do this, and we'll have this conversation again. Again, I think this is where, because I think how this season has set it up is that the loom is ultimately a fail-safe, that if all of the branch lines come off, the loom shreds those to keep the sacred timeline in which he who remains ends up being up on top. But if it blows up, I think it only takes out the TVA, but it frees the time loop to go on. I get the feeling that the loom is only the power source for the TVA, and that's it. And if it blows up, the TVA is gone, but then the time is free. But again, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because supposedly on that loop, then he would just be reborn and come back to where he is now, because he's at the end of time. And that
I definitely read it as like whether the loom explodes or not. I mean, there's going to be one timeline. The only thing that kept it from being more than just the sacred timeline was Loki, what he does at the end. Sure. Otherwise, when the TVA, because King said, oh, the TVA is just collateral damage. So I read that as, I get what I want. I get the sacred timeline when the loom explodes, and the TVA is just collateral damage. So I think either way, it's still the sacred timeline. The only thing that kept all the branches was Loki. So I think that either way, King gets what he wants. Sure. Is how I read that.
I get what they were going for, but I think the confusion you're having, Mark, and a few of that is because we've got a little bit of square peg and round hole going in, as they designed the TVA, the timeline, and everything a certain way in season 1, and to tell the season 2 story, they had to kind of tweak a few things. And I love the bit between He Who Remains and Loki in this. It's a wonderful conversation. It's a definite push that Loki needs in order to make his big final choice, feeling that he has no other choice but to kill Sylvie, which you're right, Alyssa, he'll never do. But I think that's why it doesn't totally make sense.
I don't agree that he'll never do that. I think that he was pushing for that, which is why he goes back and has a conversation, because he wants her to give her permission to kill her, and she's like, no, I'm not going to give you my permission to do that. And I think that's when he ultimately decides not to. But I think he was leaning in that direction because he realized that killing her was the only way to save the TVA and save his friends. But then, and I do think that's what He Who Remains was pushing him to do.
I just really do. I think that would be a really weak ass plan if He Who Remains, his entire thing hinges on Loki killing Sylvie. I just think that there's a very low chance of that happening, and maybe he was leaning toward it, but he didn't do it. And I think, to me, it makes a lot more sense that he's in a win-win scenario. He wins regardless of what happens. Rather, he just doesn't strike me as that much of a gambler that his whole I think hinge on Loki killing her. Like, I think he's like, I don't care what you do because I win either way. Well, I think a lot more sense for his character.
I think both can be true. I think he was saying, like, kill Sylvie, not kill her. Either way, I win. Like, that could be true. But I think that he was wanting him to kill her.
Yeah, but it didn't matter if he didn't. I don't think he cared.
Well, because again, if he kills her, if he doesn't kill her, then the loom explodes and Loki comes back and tries to stop her. He knows that he can count on that, because if he doesn't, loom explode, he comes back. If he does, then he wins. So
I think he thought he had Loki trapped in a loop with, like, where either he loses the TVA or he loses Sylvie, and that's his choice he has to make, and either way he wins. He wasn't counting on what Loki actually did. I think that was unexpected.
Yeah, that was the third choice he didn't predict.
Yeah. I think that's true too. But yeah, I don't know. I also disagree that it didn't match up with season 1. I do feel that it matched up with season 1, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, the main thing I think it didn't match up with season 1 is that he said, "I don't know what's going to happen now, and I can." Like this timer went off, and he seemed to like lose all of his powers, and he seemed to disregard that. Which again, what they did with it, I'm fine with it. Ultimately,
yeah, they told a great story. Whether it matches or not is almost secondary.
Yeah.
You know.
But. Yeah, I guess. But anyway, let's talk more about the conversation that Loki has with Sylvie, because that actually I think was amazing. That because I think here Loki was trying to get her permission to kill her, and because he laid it out, he's like, "Look, the TVA is going to explode. All my friends are going to die, and the only way to stop it is to kill you. Otherwise, all of existence is gone except for this sacred timeline. So this is our only solution." And she's like, "No. Fuck that." And I think it's this conversation that gives Loki the idea to do what he does. I think this is and this gets into the whole theme, which I think is actually fucking brilliant, that the show is set up about free will, because and this is the conflict between the two opposing sides. You have He Who Remains and Sylvie. He Who Remains perspective is there's no such thing as free will. Everything's predetermined. He's got everything figured out. He's put everyone in their past. Free will is just an illusion. But Sylvie's thing is, no, there is free will, and there can be free will. And that's something that you need to fight for. And that is ultimately what Loki chooses. And what I like what she says, she's like, sometimes you need to destroy something. And then Loki finishes that thought by saying, and replace it with something better, which gives him the idea to do what he does. And I think that, this ties into the opposing views of free will versus no free will. And ultimately free will won, because Sylvie's free will to think outside the box and to push Loki to think outside the box is what ultimately results in a outcome that He Who Remains did not predict. Anyway, Alyssa, thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, you put it really nicely. I don't know what else to say, because I think the way that you phrased it there, I think that is exactly right. That's what made that conversation so important, and it's part of what made the Loki and Sylvie relationship so important all throughout. And she's continually pushing him. And or at least for me, as I'm watching this, I'm kind of like pulling for Loki, and I'm like, Sylvie, why are you standing in his way? Why are you being such a bitch all the way throughout the season? But then it really is her who pushes him to where he needed to be. I don't think she necessarily specifically thought that that's where he was going, but she was pushing him. You're right, for that free will. No, fuck this predetermination stuff. We got to have free will. And she's pushing in that direction. And I don't even think she predicted exactly what he was going to do, but when he does it, she does know. She's like, "Oh, okay." Like I don't know if anyone else necessarily.
I didn't catch that, but I can buy it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I watched it on my second viewing. I saw her kind of reaction to it. It was like, "Oh, she gets what he's doing here." I don't think anyone else necessarily did. But because it comes from that conversation, and so they had that really strong connection that led to this. So, and again, this is something that's built on from season 1. They had their relationship in season 1, and I agree, like, it wouldn't have made a lot of sense to have them like be a romantic couple, not just because they're the same person, but just because, even though that is a little weird in and of itself. But what was that movie called? Was it called Predetermination?
Predestination.
That's Predestination. Yeah. So this has been done in fiction before,
Yeah.
but not just because of the same person, but just because it wouldn't have made sense for the story. I think this kind of relationship where Sylvie's pushing toward free will, and then Loki ultimately decides to do what he does. He thinks of what he thinks of because of her. I think that is a much stronger relationship than like some silly romantic relationship that they might have had.
Oh no, it's definitely a deeper relationship, and I think you're right, because what she really pushes him is to do the right thing, not the easy thing. Even though nothing that he's been doing is technically easy, but it's like, oh well, I can't see a solution out of this outside of doing it. It's like, yeah, but that's still the wrong thing. Again, it's the same thing that kept her from killing Victor timely. It was the same thing that pushed Loki to make that particular choice. Is you've got to do the right thing, and you're right, that protection of free will. And I think it is summed up very beautifully. Is sometimes you have to destroy something and replace it with something better. And I think that is between the pushes to do the right thing. Don't succumb to this. Find a new way of doing it. And would you be willing to take that step to protect your friends? Not just kill somebody else, but were you willing to make the sacrifice? And which he effectively does. He sacrifices himself to protect his friends and everyone else, and free will. And I think that's kind of a beautiful thing, especially since you wouldn't get that from Loki. And maybe that even comes all the way back to the Avengers with the joke to Tony about, you're not the one to lay it on the line, when it comes down to it. And that was Tony's big arc in that film. And that, in a way, pushes Loki to make that same arc himself. Are you going to put yourself on the line to do the right thing and to save everyone? And that's what he does.
Yeah. Yeah, the scene where he actually goes out and puts on the classic Loki thing, and also like I don't know if like they needed to turn magic off in the TVA because he's out in that black hole thingy. Maybe he could use his magic anyway. I was wondering that if they needed for them to turn the magic off for him in order to do what he does here. The magic blocker, I should say.
Yeah, I don't know how far outside the walls of the TVA, what its range of things are. But I think it allowed him to just be his complete self, to really pull from everything that he was.
But yeah, and I love how they sort of hint at it. Like they brought up the glorious purpose, which is the name of the episode, also the name of the first episode.
The first episode, yes.
Linking it together, which is a line that he had from the Avengers about his glory.
Which is also another Ouroboros, that the first episode and the last, assuming there's not a season 3, like the first episode and the last episode have the same name.
Yep, exactly. But it does like tie in that this actually is his glorious. Oh, and I also forgot to mention the scene when he went back to talk to Mobius. That was a very powerful scene.
That was very nice.
Because he actually went to him first before he went to Sylvie, because he was, in a crisis of faith, and I think they both sort of pushed him to make the ultimate sacrifice. And it's also interesting because when he's traveling back in the finale of episode 1, he even, like, when Sylvie says, "You just want a throne," he's like very forceful. "The last thing I want is a throne," and then that's what he ends up having to do at the end, is be alone on his throne. And I think that it was the last thing he wanted, and this is why the character journey for this character was so beautiful and so well done, because at the start of the show, this is evil Loki from the first Avengers film who just wants a throne, and he's like grown so much. And I totally buy his character growth, especially now that he's been around for centuries. And he's also like a kind of another version of He Who Remains, because He Who Remains has also been around for millennia or however, and just done things over and over and over and over again, to the point where he thinks he knows everything that's going to happen, and is kind of just doesn't give a shit about anything or whatever. Whereas Loki is close to becoming that apathetic, but then is pushed to do something different, do something great, and bring all the timelines together in this nice tree. So
yeah, well, Yggdrasil reference right there was hard to miss.
Well, I didn't, to be honest, like I didn't remember the Thor movie, so I didn't get that, or Norse mythology, so I didn't get that until I watched other videos that pointed that out to me. But yes, I think we're meant to believe that he is now the god who's maintaining all the timelines, that he is acting. Someone said, put it the way that he's doing the job that He Who Remains Timpad was doing before, that he's the thing that's holding all the timelines together. And of course, He Who Remains, his whole thing is there could only be one timeline, the sacred timeline. But with Loki, he's allowing there to be multiple timelines.
Well, while He Who Remains controlled the timeline, Loki protects the timeline.
Yes. Yeah. And I like how they showed the new job of the TVAs, rather than to prune the timelines, is to maintain them and make sure that they don't collide or don't interfere with each other, and to keep an eye on the King variants. That's why I see TVA showing up more in future projects. Like, I think Loki is done, which is why I don't think there'll be a season 3 of Loki, because he's now this thing. And Tom Hiddleston has apparently said in interviews that his journey as Loki is over. He says this concludes it. But again, actors.
I don't see any room for Loki season 3. I do see a possibility for in a Secret Wars or a King Dynasty where like Thor has to go and visit this Loki, or I could see this version of Loki making another appearance in one of those big Avenger movies. But I don't see him. Yeah, you can't do another show about him. You can't do another big like storyline for this character who's just going to sit there, unless the ultimate outcome of this is that that ends up changing and we no longer have that big tree of multiversal stream branches, whatever, that maybe Loki plays a role in whatever happens with that. But I don't see him being like a major character moving forward, at least not this version of Loki. But I think there's room for him to appear, though. But
this because I've seen those. There's been various quotes by Hiddleston that have been circulating around. One is like, this variant story is over. But I think he's also said something like, to count me out, you'd be on the wrong side of things. Is that he'll probably come back.
That is not what I heard. I heard him say my 14-year journey playing this character is over. Which doesn't imply it's just the variant, because he was playing a different variant from 14.
I saw that as well, and then I saw other ones that were just like, hey, don't count me out in appearing again. I love this character.
Oh, really?
I don't know. I mean, I would certainly agree that the only way that you would see this character again is in some sort of like Secret War as a reference, or as a coming up, or some little advice scene or something like that. You may see a variant of Loki, another variant, but I think this story is done. There is no season 3 to be told with this character. He's an all-powerful god at this point who can control time with a thought. So I don't really see how he can evolve any further.
I think they could show this version of this character in like a Secret Wars or something, not as like a main character, but someone who like just appears to be the do a godlike thing or whatever.
Yeah, or I could see like Thor having to go visit him or something. Or like one of the characters having, we gotta go see Loki.
or even we have to go see the God of Stories.
Yeah, the God of Stories.
And then it ends up being Loki. And
he's
like, what the hell?
I could see Thor being involved, because he'd be like, "What, Loki? What?"
I think that would definitely be a possibility, but I don't really see any other. I don't see where else this character could really do. So I don't see a season 3 being a reality.
I don't see season 3 of Loki, but They could do a TVA spinoff.
That's true. I mean, you did catch the Ant-Man reference in the
Yes.
final
Yeah.
episode, which
Yes.
is nice. The He Who Remains. There was a He Who Remains variant, 616 adjacent.
Yeah.
They seem to have calmed him down. I was like, okay, that's nice. That show referred to this one, so this one referred back to that one. Okay, very good.
But then there's the talk that Marvel's going to change direction and not do King anymore and pivot to Doctor Doom.
I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
That's the
bring
same
back
quote
Tony
from the
Stark
person
and Captain America. And
I think it's more likely to bring back Tony Stark and Captain America than to pivot to Doctor Doom at this point. I think it makes no sense to pivot to Doctor Doom if Jonathan Majors, isn't able to come back from his issues. You recast King and you
exactly.
Yeah.
You come up with some silly explanation about variants and why he looks
Yeah.
you do Terrence Howard with them, it's just, hey, it's me, I'm here, let's move on with it.
you can't.
There.
I mean, you can introduce Doctor Doom, but to pivot to him as the main villain, it's too late for that. The ship has sailed.
Well, and remember, all of these came from the same article or same quote where the person was like, yeah, I saw the final episode and they set up King and Marvel's totally fucked. They don't refer to him at all. You could totally, if you're against King or not, it has nothing to do with how this show ended.
I think they do set up King because they did set up with the TVA keeping an eye on the King variants.
But they don't marry it.
Follow up on King.
It's not like they had this final King scene where he's out in the world and he's looking over the Marvel universe and he's, I'm coming now, or anything like that.
I really hope they don't pivot. I hope they follow. I would need to see King. If you need to recast, then recast. Like, don't be scared to recast.
Yeah, but also I don't really see that his legal stuff has even really barely been on the radar outside of people that want to cause, clickbait articles. So, I mean, most people I know have no idea that Jonathan Majors is going on with anything. So I don't really think it's this big overshadowing threat to Disney that clickbait writers want.
No, clickbait writers do exaggerate things for those clicks. Make things sound worse than they are. But I think bringing back Tony Stark and I want to say Will Rogers, but that's not his name. What's his name?
Steve Rogers?
Steve Rogers?
Steve Rogers, yes, thank you. Bringing back Steve Rogers and Tony Stark. I'm just as against that as pivoting to Doctor Doom. Don't do that.
No, I mean, again, that's just people that are like, oh, we got to bring back the classic. Marvel has ton. Again, X-Men and Fantastic Four haven't even been touched yet. They've got so much up their sleeve. Yeah. Doom has there's no need to try and bring back Robert Downey Jr.
And I was thinking about, I don't know if I ever do this, but I was thinking about making a video on my channel called No, Marvel is not lost its touch, is not in danger, it's fine. I honestly, and maybe this is my opinion, maybe I have a lesser opinion of the earlier phases than everyone else, but I don't really think these later phases are any better or worse than the earlier phases, because I think people overrate the earlier phases. I think those earlier phases, especially phase 1, had a lot of issues as well. And I think it's the same thing with phase 4 and 5 so far, is that there's some bad, some good, especially like Loki season 2. It shows me that Marvel definitely still has its touch. And also that they shouldn't change direction with King, that she should absolutely follow through with King.
Yeah, my biggest problem with phase 4, I think, it was that it was oversaturated. It was just a bit too much, and I think they realized that, and they've pulled back on that a little bit. We got much less in 2024 than we did or 23 than we did in 22, and then in 24 right now there's only one movie on the dockets, and
they say that's going to stay. Yeah,
who knows about Disney Plus shows?
I think there's 4 though next year.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, they're well, did you hear about they're doing the Marvel Spotlight thing, which is Echo is going to be the first project in that, which I guess is spotlight means you don't have to have watched all the million other things to follow.
Oh, really?
So
and it may not adhere to timelines entirely. So
I thought Echo was going to feed into Daredevil.
So I think Daredevil's also going to be a spotlight thing.
Oh, is it? Okay.
So I think those more the street level, like kind of the reboot of the Netflix kind of Marvel stuff. I think that's going to be the spotlight, more street level stuff. The rest of it, though, I kind of feel like if you're not going to tie into the multiversal saga at this point, like I don't need to see Ironheart unless she's going to tie into the multiversal saga. Like I want everything to tie into multiversal saga at this point in some small way. Otherwise, like I don't know. I don't know how the Eternals fits in, or Black Knight, or
here's the thing. I think
or Blade, or any of that.
Yeah, I think they should abandon that stuff. Like the Eternals, like that wasn't very good or very popular. I think they should not bring them back. They should abandon those loose threads with Star Fox or whatever the hell his name is popping up, saying that's not working. Let's just focus on the stuff that does work. And like, I don't know, maybe even Moon Knight. Like, I think they've gone off in too many splintered directions, and they need to be a bit more focused.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. Yeah, there was the Black Knight is supposed to tie into Blade. Like, what is Blade going to have to do with anything? I don't know. Like, I just feel like, unless
I think Blade, I really don't want to see it as part of the MCU. I really think that should be a separate thing too, because they're going to bring vampires into the MCU. Like, I don't know.
Look, unless you're bringing back Wesley Snipes, I don't care. You got to have Wesley Snipes in his old Blade, and this is Mahershala Ali is now young Blade. No, I don't know. I love Mahershala Ali. I mean, I'd certainly love to see him in this. I think Marvel knows it needs to make some adjustments, and I think it's doing that.
Yeah.
I think just the idea of putting showrunners in charge of shows and actually having a writer's room, and instead of just all these spurious almost one-offs that these have been lately, I think that's their issue. I think they just tried to do too many things and didn't listen to the lessons that it themselves wrote.
So when is Echo coming out? Is that the end of the
January
10th?
January 10th. Okay, January.
And then What If season 2 is December, right?
December.
Yeah, and that's going to be weekly though, right? What If?
Yeah, What If will be weekly, so it probably will not finish in 2023.
Yeah,
but it's going to start. What I heard was a holiday season, so at the end of December, and we'll probably finish up in January.
Yeah, and Echo's only 5 episodes, and they're dropping all at once.
I know the Echo is all at once. Yeah, and actually, I think it's a good thing what I hear about Daredevil that they completely retooling it, because it sounded like it was supposed to be like goofy and lighthearted, which don't do that. Like, seriously, you're using the same actor from the Netflix show. Give it the same tone as the Netflix show.
Yeah, and that sounds like what they're doing. And I don't know if you saw the trailer for Echo, but that is very like Netflixy. Like, it's very
It's like they had a disclaimer: set your Disney Plus things to adult and or mature in order to watch this.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted Daredevil to feed into the greater MCU, though.
I mean,
it might. Who knows?
They're literally writing it right now, so who knows what they will come up with.
Yeah,
I think they're saving some stuff that was already shot, but they're tossing a lot of it and kind of starting over. So
and I agree that this is a good thing, but all those clickbaity articles are like, "Oh, the MCU's in disarray because they have to totally. Oh, it's all fucked that they have to redo." No, it's probably a good thing that they're redoing.
But even with all the problems we mentioned, I still think like all the previous phases had their issues as well. And maybe I have a lesser opinion because I know I have a lesser opinion of, say, Captain America Civil War than everyone else. I thought that movie was atrocious when everyone else we had this discussion before.
Yes. I'm on the same page with you with Captain America Civil War. I don't know. Atrocious is a strong word, but I don't think it's anywhere near as good as other people.
Contrivance. There's so much contrivance. It drives me insane.
But I mean, I think the way that Phase 3 ended was so epic that people retroactively like apply this greatness to the rest of
Yeah.
the phases, and I don't think it was always there. I think it was always up and down. Again, the biggest difference between Phase 4 was there was way more stuff, and you couldn't see how they all fit together, and it was a little too much. But I think they're pulling back and they're fixing that. But other than that, I don't see a huge difference in the quality, honestly.
I would say Phase 4 didn't quite pick up the baton as well from Phase 3 and move it forward quite as much. It was a little bit of a stumble, but I think they have to retool and reset. Phase 3 ended up 10, 12 years of storytelling, over 22 movies.
Yeah,
they're starting again,
not every part of Phase 3 was amazing, though. I'm trying to think. There were some duds in that. And I think maybe like Phase 3 was better than Phase 2, though. So I think Phase 4 maybe be more on par with Phase 2.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they did, after Endgame, they did take a step back, but they're recovering. They'll get back. I am not worried.
Phase 2 did have Thor: The Dark World, so let's not,
Well, all right. I'm gonna stay totally spoiler free, Darrin, but I'm gonna talk about the Marvels a bit.
Okay. Well, look, I got a thing I got to do anyway, so I can sign off and let you guys actually go fully into spoiler territory. I know we got a Star Trek thing. I will get back to you on that.
Yeah.
Next week, maybe the week after. I'll get back to you. Alyssa, it was great chatting with you as always. Mark, everybody, I'm gonna go because this guy let's talk some Marvel stuff. All right.
All right, good to see you, Darrin.
All right, good seeing you, Darrin.
All right, so our Loki discussion is over, and we're just going to talk about the Marvels now.
Yeah.
For a second, I was like, Mark and Darrin realized we're still live.
Yeah, well, yeah.
All right,
I don't know if we want to get into
Marvels.
spoilers for those who haven't. I don't know if everyone.
Well, no, I think we give a spoiler warning right here. Spoiler. Marvels mid-credit scene. Is that what we're going to talk about?
Well, yeah, okay. I mean, the first thing I wanted to ask, though, was kind of a spoiler-free question, was did you like the Marvels better than Captain Marvel? Because I did.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I definitely liked it better than Captain Marvel. I put it in the Marvel films of this year of Phase 5 right smack in the middle. I would put Guardians of the Galaxy a little ahead, and I put it ahead of Ant-Man by a long ways.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think you maybe liked the movie a little bit more than I did. But I liked because the one thing you said in I think it was your live chat, you mentioned you didn't think it was rushed. I kind of did a little bit, but I still liked it. I just wish they would have spent more time on some of the character stuff. And it did seem like they sped through the plot line a little too fast, in my opinion. So that's my only minor complaint. But other than that, I loved it. I loved all the character interactions. I loved seeing these characters together.
No, I'm tired of sitting in a movie theater for 3 hours with all these characters.
It doesn't need to be 3 hours. It could just be
I don't know. I use Guardians of the Galaxy 3 as an example that what's his face? Adam Warlock, he didn't need to be there.
Oh yeah, totally.
I mean, I just feel like that Marvel films do sometimes like get off on these side tangents or unnecessary characters that I felt like this film just skipped over and like let's just get to the point. So to me, it did not feel rushed, but that's me.
Well, fair enough. I just thought some of the individual scenes, like the pacing of the dialogue, was like they could have maybe slowed it down a bit.
Yeah.
And I thought like the planet where they're all singing, like that's reminded me of the Strange World.
I knew you were going to hate that.
I hated it, but if they're going to do it, then do it. It felt like they just sped through that they should have developed those characters a bit.
No, I actually thought that singing planet was in it as much as it needed to be. I didn't need to see any more singing planet.
And then I heard like people seem to be really split on this movie, either love it or hate it. Because before I saw the movie, I watched 2 reviews that trashed it. Like this one guy was saying that it was a total mess and the script was a mess and nobody knew what it was doing and the reshoots were awful. So I was bracing myself because I was really looking forward to this movie. This is the Marvel project I had been looking forward to the most all year. I watched the trailer like on repeat. But when I saw those bad reviews, I was like bracing myself for a terrible movie. And I was like, this is not bad. That's not that bad. I don't see what these people are talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I saw some articles, like clickbaity articles that I didn't click on, that were positive on it before I watched it. So it's been mixed reviews since before I've seen it. So and it continues to be mixed reviews. But yeah, was it the greatest thing ever? No, but I enjoyed it. I definitely thought it was light years better than Ant-Man Wasp Quantumania.
Yeah, and people were saying, the one guy I was referring to was like, this is easily the worst thing Marvel ever done. Is way worse than Thor: The Dark World and the Eternals put together. And I'm like, no, this.
What movie are you watching? Like, what are you even talking about?
This guy named Darrin Merle used to be on Screen Junkies.
Yeah, no, I'm saying to that person, what are you watching? Like,
Right.
What movie are you watching? I don't get it. And what did you think of the villain? Because I thought the villain.
I was going to bring that up next, actually, because one of the things so one of the things that reviewers said is that this is the most bland, worst villain in the MCU ever, and I'm like, again, no, this villain's actually better than that dude from Thor: Dark World and the Thor. What was the last one? Love and Thunder. That villain was bland too. And there's tons of more villains in the entire MCU that were way more bland. Granted, I don't think she was developed that much, but she didn't need to be. Like, she wasn't the point of the movie. She was the driver of the plot, and I think they explained her well enough. I think her motivations were crystal clear, that she had a vendetta against Captain Marvel for destroying the what they called the artificial intelligence, the grand intelligence. What was the central? What kind of
supreme intelligence?
Sorry, yeah, the supreme intelligence, and she had and the fact that destroyed the world. And so she had a grudge against her for that, but also was trying to save her world at the same time, but do it in a way that spited Captain Marvel. And I think that was crystal clear motivation, and that's all you need for the movie.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't need the most developed, most amazing villain ever in every movie. Like she was fine. She filled her role. She did her purpose. So I was totally.
And I liked the actress in this role too. I thought.
Yeah. Although I kept thinking she reminded me so much of Emilia Clarke. I kept thinking.
Oh, really? I didn't get that.
Yeah, I was like, this is not Emilia Clarke, but I don't know.
But all right. But let's talk about the mid-credit scene.
Spoiler.
Oh, we've already gotten the spoilers, but yeah.
But this is a big spoiler, though. Yeah. Like, you don't want, because Darrin had made a comment earlier. Oh, they haven't even touched the X-Men yet. I'm like, although they already actually have with Professor X and Doctor Strange. So, but
but this, I mean, that was also a different universe. But now, I don't know, because I want Marvel, the MCU, to reboot the X-Men. I don't, and this seemed to be the same Fox characters, but then again, maybe Deadpool's going to deal with this a bit more.
I think that's my understanding, that Deadpool is going to kind of like sort this out a little bit, hopefully. Like, as I
wonder if Monica Rambeau is going to appear in Deadpool.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think she is. But so I think ultimately when we get to the end of Secret Wars and all of that stuff, I think we are going to end up with a rebooted X-Men. But I think in the meantime, we're going to see a lot of those Fox people before we get to that point.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I saw those theories online, and I guess that makes
We already have. I mean, we're already seeing them, so I think that's good.
Yeah.
And we know Wolverine is in Deadpool, and I heard he was going to be a big part of Secret Wars, but I don't know if that's true or not. But
yeah, that's just rumor at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be weird having Deadpool 3 be the linchpin to lead into this multiverse thing because it's such a, fourth wall breaking comedy. And I'm sure he's going to have this fourth wall breaking, like, asides, like explaining, oh, this is what happens after Disney buys Fox or something like that.
Yeah. I feel like She-Hulk should be in that movie, at least maybe. The fourth wall breaking people together.
I do wonder how heavy they're going to lean on this fourth wall.
Yeah. But
I mean, the other thing I was going to mention, other than the X-Men, was also the Young Avengers, because they're also setting up for that, and I haven't heard any definitive timeline of that being streamlined. I don't know if that would be a show or a movie.
That would make more sense as a movie to me, but who knows?
Really? I was thinking show, actually.
Oh, okay.
But I think it could work either way, though.
Yeah. And we don't know yet who's going to be in the Young Avengers other than 3 people.
Oh, so is Cassie confirmed for it?
Well, I mean, she said, "Oh, do you know Ant-Man has a daughter?" So she's confirmed.
Oh, I didn't catch that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. She says, "Did you know Ant-Man had a daughter?" So it's like, okay, so Cassidy's going to be in this. So, yeah, I feel like they would get at least a couple dudes in there too.
I think I have. Yeah, I don't know who else they could have. There's Ironheart.
Yeah, so supposedly, the son or grandson of the guy who appeared in Falcon Winter Soldier, like the old guy.
Oh, right, yeah.
He's in the comic books, he's like a Young Avenger. So I forget what his name is. So I think maybe they could decide to go with him if they wanted to, or apparently in the comics, Wanda's children are in the Young Avengers, but I don't know if that would work.
Yeah. They would have to
make it a multiversal thing.
But yeah, I hope they don't abandon that. I want to see the young Avengers.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I didn't realize because it's been so long since I've seen it that Kamala Khan just quoted Samuel L. Jackson when he recruited, or paraphrased really when he recruited Tony Stark. I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, the one thing I will say about the Marvels that I was kind of slightly disappointed on, and maybe this is again a victim of my own expectations, but I was expecting more with the Flurkins than just them eating people and bringing them back to the planet. I thought they were fight the villains or be more bigger part of the plot. And I think overall wasn't that big of a fan of that whole station evacuation thing. Some people seem to love that, but I was just I don't know. It kind of seemed like an aside.
I don't know. I guess I had no expectations for the Flurkins being anything. I didn't even know the Flurkins were going to be in this movie other than that one. So I didn't know that.
I remember seeing from the original trailer them showing a whole bunch of cats walking down the stairs. I'm like, oh my god, multiple Flurkins! This is going to be awesome.
Yeah. No, I guess I didn't have any expectations for it. So I was like, whatever. It's fine.
I mean, that was a funny sequence. I did kind of like that, where there's a loudspeaker being like, please let the Flurkins eat you.
Stop running. You're going to be fine.
But yeah, I think Kamala Khan, even people who didn't like the movie were saying that she was the heart of it. And I think that was definitely true.
She was. And for me personally, she got a better story than she did in her show. I thought I liked this so much better than her show.
I agree. I think her show was a bit uneven and a bit convoluted
Yeah.
villains.
But the heart of that show was the characters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, and apparently there's a controversy with the actor who plays her dad as well. So that.
I didn't hear that. Well, he could be recast pretty easily.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing of like recast. They might be more hesitant to recast Kang as opposed to like Rhodey, who was just mainly just like a sidekick, or whoever.
Yeah,
else.
but they could come up with some multiversal. They really want to.
And also Jonathan Majors is so good in the role, so it's just the thing that you have to find someone else is also really great in that role.
Yeah, I just think it's too late to put Dr. Doom in it at this point.
Yeah, I hope that's nonsense. I
think it is.
Yeah, there's some executive throwing out some bullshit that the real creative heads are going to be like, yeah, no. But anyway, yeah, I think that's it, right? That's pretty much.
Yeah, we're way beyond our Loki discussion. We're getting into the Marvel discussion.
All right, so yeah, we'll go ahead and end this here. I'd like to thank Darrin, who had to take off, and anyone who popped in the chat. We had Alex and Rob and Bob for a bit, and anyone watching us in the archives. Thank you so much for watching. And Alyssa, if you just want to give a quick shout out to what you're up to.
I'm over on Alyssa Jean's reviews, just pretty much strictly Star Trek stuff at this point. So if you like Star Trek, check out my Star Trek Top 100 of the Legacy Trek. And then this Friday, I have my Star Trek Modern Trek Top 25 coming out as well. So if you like Star Trek, go check that out.
And I'm, of course, going full on Star Trek as well. But if you haven't watched my review for season 2 of Loki as a whole, you can check that out. But other than that, yeah, mostly doing going back and reviewing every episode of Next Generation. Now that Lower Decks and Ahsoka and Loki are over, I'm going to focus full on doing the season 2 of Next Gen. So hopefully I can get to season 3, which is much better. Anyway, and yes, as Darrin mentioned earlier, we will be back sometime this month to do a discussion on my number 17 in my top 25 favorite episodes of Star Trek, which I might as well just say what it is right here. It's going to be the 2-parter Scorpion from Voyager that ended season 3 and began season 4 and introduced 7 of 9 species 847265309. Anyway, and so we'll be back. Date to be determined, but sometime later this month, Darrin and Alyssa back again to talk about that. So yeah, be sure to check us out for that. See you all next time. Wow. Hold on. Let me find this. All right.